Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to talk about Microsoft and their current corporate social responsibility strategy, as well as the future of artificial intelligence technology. My name is Justin Lentz. I'm here with Courtney Arison, Renee Garvey, and Tim Kunz. We wanted to create a brief schedule for you guys today, and first we're going to touch on the case summary. So TechSpark is Microsoft's current corporate social responsibility strategy, and the main goal of TechSpark is to foster economic growth through artificial intelligence and in rural communities and small urban populations as well. The 5 core values of TechSpark are digital transformation, and Microsoft wants to work with companies who create products and make sure that they're using the best and latest technology. The next would be digital skill development, and Microsoft works with nonprofits and schools to help make sure kids are learning all about and how to use this great new technology that's available. Next is rural broadband. So Microsoft wants to expand the reach of internet access into rural communities to make sure it's more interconnected. Next would be career pathways. Microsoft wants to make sure that even if you don't have a college degree, you still have the skills necessary to get a job in technology down the road. And then finally, nonprofit support. So Microsoft wants to work with nonprofits by providing financial aid as well as technology to help them accomplish their goals. So for our recommendation, we wanted to implement the TechSpark initiative into Cheyenne, Wyoming. And in Cheyenne, we came up with 2 recommendations to implement. The first would be a middle school computer education program that encompasses 3 of the 5 TechSpark initiatives. Next would be a patient engagement technology, which encompasses the final 2 TechSpark initiatives. So now let's dive into the analysis. So for the past few years, artificial intelligence has steadily been on the rise. By 2030, artificial intelligence will add $15.7 trillion to the global economy. The United States will benefit from about 23.6% of that total added growth. So as far as the stakeholders, Microsoft has quite a few stakeholders. But the 3 we're going to focus on today are communities, employees, and customers. So let's take a look at rural America. About 20 to 25%, or rural household income trails urban household income by about 20 to 25%. Along with that, 19% of the rural population has a bachelor's degree compared to 33% of the urban population. Moving on, with internet access, about 39% of the rural population lacks internet connectivity compared to only 4% of the urban population. And we believe that's ultimately because of the extremely high costs associated with branching out this high-speed internet to these rural communities. So now, taking a look at the computer science industry as a whole, computing occupations are the #1 source of all new wage revenue in the United States right now. Currently, there are about 502 open computing jobs in Wyoming, and that demand is about 5.3 times higher than any average job in Wyoming currently. Ultimately, this translates to about $32 million in available salary that's on the table. And going back to the US as a whole, fewer than half of schools in the country offer any computer science classes. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Courtney, and she's going to go into our healthcare analysis.
Thank you, Justin. So according to the National Rural Healthcare Association, less than 10% of physicians practice in these rural communities. In addition, when asked to describe their healthcare status, only 19.5% of the rural population described as poor, as opposed to 15.6% of the urban population. These 2 charts come from a study done by a rural healthcare center in South Carolina. And as you can see, there are major discrepancies between the time traveled in rural and urban communities to get to the healthcare physicians they need. Our goal is to eliminate these discrepancies and make healthcare accessible to anyone in rural communities. So we decided to take a look at a SWOT of Microsoft and how it impacts the rural communities that they're trying to implement these programs into. A unique strength for Microsoft is that they're the leader in the cloud sector. This means they have ample amounts of information that's extremely relevant in healthcare and education industries. A weakness they have are their legal battles, and this can be anything from system failures to production liability. As Justin stated, computing jobs are the #1 source of all new wages in the United States, and that is a huge opportunity for Microsoft to fill the demand for these jobs in technology and to ultimately close the connectivity gap between the rural communities. And finally, a threat that Microsoft faces are cybersecurity concerns, and I'll touch more on this later in the presentation. So the key issue we've identified for Microsoft is the negative connotation around big tech, artificial intelligence, and job disruption. And to combat this issue, we have 2 recommendations. The first is going to be a middle school computer education program, and the second is a patient engagement technology program. And now I'm going to hand it over to Tim to walk us through our first recommendation.
Perfect. Thank you, Courtney. So taking a look, what we're proposing here is a middle school computer education program. We'll be selecting 3 schools in Cheyenne. There'll be 30 students per school for a total of 90 students. In addition to this computer class, we'll also be implementing a mentorship program to pair. We'll be utilizing our current asset and great relationship with the nonprofit Skillful, and we'll be requesting 15 volunteer coaches from Skillful. So before we dive into what that actual curriculum looks like, let's walk through a couple statistics. So right now, 65% of kids 8 to 17 years old actively use computers in their home. More than 50% of jobs today require skills in technology, and Microsoft Office are in the most top 3 required skills across any job. So it's clear to see that there's a generation now using technology at a young age. There's never been a higher demand for jobs in computing and technology, and we'd like to recommend that Microsoft steps up and becomes a leader in bridging this gap in middle school education. So looking specifically at the content, let's talk about how we're going to get there. We've considered a couple different platforms to help us reach this goal. We have MindDojo, Pearson, and Coursera, all of which are actively utilizing artificial intelligence to do things such as automate tasks like grading, as well as scheduling, and they're taking strides to providing individualized learning experiences for each student. The class specifically is going to feature content like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, a very heavy focus in keyboard efficiency with a small exposure to computer science. So taking a look at the mentorship program, kids with mentors are 52% less likely to skip a day of school. They're 37% less likely to skip a day of class, and they are 56% more likely to enroll in college. So for this mentorship program, we'll be utilizing 6 students per mentor. The student will meet with this mentor once a month for 1 hour, and they'll be following them throughout their high school experience. This mentor will be able to guide them on schoolwork, eventually their college choice, and if they choose not to go to college, career guidance on what type of jobs they can take in the technology industry. So looking at the business impacts, what's imperative to understand is we're not here to recommend a short fix. Our recommendations strive towards a long-term sustainable solution that's going to shape generations to come. And we believe this starts with instilling computer interest and proficiency into Wyoming's youth. We believe once we do this at the middle school level, it will continue through the high school level and eventually increase Wyoming's collegiate computer science majors on college. We believe, of course, after understanding the undeniable job market in computer science and technology as a whole, should be lowering Wyoming's rural unemployment rate by 20%. I'd now like to pass it over to Renee to speak about our patient engagement technology.
Thank you, Tim. So to go over a patient engagement technology strategy, we are focusing on implementing this in the Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. This currently has about 240 physicians working there, which we'll be distributing tablets to. We will also be distributing Microsoft Surface tablets to 100 patients. These patients will consist of new mothers, the elderly, people struggling with mental health, and post-surgery patients. For some statistics about new mothers, it has been shown that only 46% of rural counties have in-county OBGYN services. Also, by using Microsoft Surface tablets as well as their technology in the CHAMP app has led to success in 62 patients in Kansas and 16 families in Seattle. In fact, since 2014, no baby with HLHS disease has lost its life since using the CHAMP app, which utilizes Microsoft Surface technology and software. Now for some facts about mental health. It has been shown that 53% of mental health professional shortage areas were located in non-metropolitan areas. This means that those struggling with mental health cannot get to the therapist or healthcare facility that they need to get to a better physical and mental state. Now, as Tim said before, we are focusing on long-term impacts. These are coming in the form of reducing travel time for patients, where some of them can be traveling 4 hours to get to the healthcare facility that they need, improving medication monitoring, but ultimately streamlining doctor-patient communication. It has been shown patients with higher levels of engagement are 31% less expensive to care for. Also, those that are engaged are 50% less likely to be readmitted to the hospital within 30 days. Now, before deciding upon the 2 recommendations, which we just went over for you, we did debate some alternatives. The first was an elementary school initiative. But after analyzing it, we realized that it was not relevant or feasible to be teaching students at such a young age the tools such as Microsoft PowerPoint and Excel. Then we debated making healthcare its own sixth spoke of textbook instead of incorporating it into the already established areas. But that did not leverage the current assets that Microsoft currently has, so we ruled that one out as well. Now, to recap how our 2 recommendations fully incorporate all 5 areas of textbook, the middle school program incorporates digital skills development, career pathways, and nonprofit support, whereas our patient engagement technology strategy incorporates digital transformation and rural broadband. Now I'd like to hand it back to Courtney to talk about implementation.
Okay, so with our implementation, we plan on utilizing Microsoft's Inspire conference that occurs every July to announce our initiatives. After that, we'll roll out both initiatives in the month of August and do a year-long evaluation, and upon June of 2019, we'll make any necessary changes to roll it out in schools in the following year. So with the middle school education program, we'll be evaluating GPA, and with the healthcare initiative, we'll be doing patient evaluation surveys. Now, before we get into the benefits of our recommendations, we're going to take a look at some risks that we've identified. The first being a lack of patient engagement due to cybersecurity concerns. We plan on mitigating this risk by leveraging the trusted technology of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. This provides data protection and safeguards medical information. Next, we have a lack of participation amongst middle school students. We plan on mitigating this by embedding the technology into the school's curriculum and utilizing highly qualified and motivated teachers who understand the importance of technology in the future of education. And finally, we don't want to overextend TechSmart's reach too soon. As Renee said, we will not be implementing a 6th spoke so that we don't destabilize the program, and we're doing these routine evaluations with the middle schoolers and the patients to see where we can improve to make this a long-term sustainable plan. And now I'll hand it over to Justin, who will walk us through our costs and benefits.
Thank you, Courtney. So let's take a look at the costs here. So for the middle school computer proficiency program, we're anticipating that it's going to cost about $318,000 to implement, as well as about 1,800 volunteer hours for the Skillful Initiative program. We believe that through our recommendations, there will be about $61.5 million added in revenue to the Wyoming economy that Microsoft will have the chance to tap into and gain a percentage of that market share. But overall, more important than the cost and the benefits here is the long-term focus. Providing this program to these middle school kids will prepare them for the jobs ahead with the future of technology. So now let's take a look at the patient engagement. We believe that the cost for this will be about $271,000 to implement. And the overall savings per year is going to be about $83,000 through practice efficiency. And we believe that this solution in the long term will ultimately lead to patients and practices spending less time when they need to, as well as saving costs and ultimately leading to a healthier rural America. So in order to measure our effectiveness, we're taking a look at the middle school computer proficiency program. We're going to look at their middle school GPA, high school GPA, college acceptance rate, and their job placement, whether it's after high school or after college. So for the patient engagement technology, we're going to do patient travel time, patient satisfaction surveys, overall practice efficiency, as well as misuse of medication. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Tim to go over stakeholder impact.
Thank you, Justin. So now that you guys understand what our recommendations are, we want to talk about how it's going to impact the most important stakeholders. Looking first at employees, the employees at Microsoft now understand that no matter how big or small their job is at Microsoft, they're part of something bigger that is now making a difference in the world, and we feel this is going to motivate them to work harder in the organization they believe in. Looking specifically at the customers, as we learned earlier, big technology and artificial intelligence can tend to have a negative connotation in the consumer's mind, but we feel showing them that we're out in the field truly making a difference will allow Microsoft to win more business due to customers wanting to support socially sustainable companies. Bringing it full circle now, talking about the impacts on society as a whole in the communities, what we want to get across is that the problems that we're solving specifically for Wyoming are problems that are absolutely evident across other rural areas, and we believe this will provide us the opportunity to use the model we've created for these recommendations to scale these recommendations across the country. So we'll be creating a better prepared workforce for the undeniable new job market. This in turn will create better prepared employees and lowering the rural unemployment rate and increasing the average rural income as these jobs tend to pay higher wages. We're changing the way we do healthcare, saving costs for both patients and healthcare companies, and we believe these three things together will be slowing the trend to urbanization, allowing Microsoft to save thousands of jobs and millions of dollars in potential income for these rural communities who need it the most. Thank you, guys.
Is that on?
Yes.
Are you the first question? Why Cheyenne?
Absolutely. So we had taken a look at the different states that were provided, and we decided to go with Wyoming because they had one of the highest ratios of rural population to regular population, recognizing the largest difference we can make. And we saw North Dakota, they selected the capital in order to support infrastructure-wise the recommendations. So we wanted to do the same with Wyoming, picking the capital of Cheyenne.
You make a statement in one of your early slides that you believe you can achieve a result of, I think it was something like 20% reduction in unemployment. Can you explain what you base that conclusion on?
Absolutely. So as we've learned today, jobs in computing are now going to be the #1 source of all new wages, as well as the hard reality that artificial intelligence is going to be displacing jobs. Once it does this, we do believe that the jobs that are left over after these displacements are going to be very dependent on technology and computers, and we feel that by educating the next generation, they'll be able to take these jobs, these new jobs that are occurring, instead of being unemployed without the skills that we're providing them to learn and survive in the new market.
So in your focus of stakeholders, you narrowed, your focus was on community, employees, and customer, correct? So from a community perspective, I don't, and forgive me if I don't remember it, but in terms of risk and the community's adoption of these two recommendations, can you speak to that?
So what aspect of the communities are
Well, I think just the adoption of the technology in order for you to gain this.
Sure. So
benefit.
TechSpark already did a short program in Cheyenne, Wyoming this past December where they did a one-day, I think it was just going over technology. It wasn't, yeah, with 10 students. It wasn't as full-blown as we're trying to make it. So that shows that the community is already accepting this change in education and the change in technology. And we think that because of that, it'll be very feasible to implement this program in the community.
Thank you guys for your presentation. I have a question kind of similar to the last one, especially, so I know it's going to start in Cheyenne, but especially as you start to scale it, can you talk about when we're thinking of rural populations, specifically the middle school program, take a population or schools that don't have any technology currently, can you just talk about what sort of the instructional technology and professional development for teachers will look like and just kind of how that fits in your bigger plan?
Okay, so just to clarify, you want to find out how we're going to implement our program in schools that don't have the technology in place?
And thinking about kind of the learning curve of here where you have no technology, maybe our students don't even have internet or computers at home or in school, and now we're rolling out this new AI. So is there a huge gap there that needs to be filled, and how would you fill it?
That's a good question, and I think most of these schools should have, of all places in a city, like a school is going to be where they have these internet connectivity, especially in Cheyenne. That's why we chose the capital, because we knew we'd get the basic amount of internet to be able to do our program. And part of the implementing the classes, we're going to be choosing the teachers that we believe are most engaged and would be most passionate about this sort of coursework. We don't want to choose a teacher that's teaches English class that might not be as interested, because then the students won't be as involved. So on the front end, we definitely want to choose teachers that are engaged and then use the basic amount of technology, whatever the school provides, to implement this software.
I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
So I'm going to push you a little further on that. So take a school, and there are plenty of schools in the U.S. I'm thinking of when you scale outside of Cheyenne. I really hate talking in this. So I'm going to give you an example of Baltimore City, where students might not have any technology during the day, or they have a really outdated computer lab that maybe they get to go to once a week. And also teachers might not have a lot of education on how training students to really use that technology. So can you just talk a little bit more about how could you account for that in this program, in the cases where it's needed?
Absolutely. So for those situations, we'd have to evaluate it on the front end. So going into the city, we'd take into account which schools have what technology and kind of do an inventory and then adjust the cost accordingly. So we did all of our calculations just based on Cheyenne. So if we were moving into a city like Baltimore, for example, we'd have to take that into account. So Microsoft would have to allocate X amount of money extra to, upgrade the computers to a basic enough model to run the software needed to teach the students about this program.
If I could also add to that, we can utilize our skillful volunteers to help train teachers that might not have the education in this kind of technology, and also they can help the students who haven't had the access to this kind of technology as well.
Corporate involvement in education is certainly a crowded space, so there's lots of other tech companies and companies outside the sector doing it. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about differentiation in terms of this particular investment, and how you think about collaboration opportunities versus where you'd want to differentiate?
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely think that providing the computer science aspect of it is what's going to set us apart. There absolutely are other companies that we found, of course, that are doing basic level exposure to technology, such as the Microsoft and Excel. But with that specific focus in Wyoming, we did uncover just how much computer science is necessary there. So we felt this was a unique opportunity to gain an edge and start exposing them to the basics of computer science at a young age. So that would say that was our differentiator.
What did you find in Cheyenne with regard to computer science education in the high schools, and what does computer science look like at the university level? What is that going to look like as students move up, and what opportunities exist?
Yes, sir, absolutely. That's a great question. So as of right now, I'm sure you guys know Microsoft has the TEAL program where they're working with high schools to gain AP technology and teach these kids computer science. So right now, there aren't currently any TEAL programs in rural Wyoming, Cheyenne specifically, but we did find that after Microsoft intervened and did that one-day program with the students, Cheyenne saw how impactful it could be, and both their president of their city council and the governor of the state is fully supportive of education reform in computers and computer science, and they're actually currently voting on legislation right now to remove one science credit, traditional science credit, and putting in a mandatory computer science credit, and it's anticipated to go through.